Where does all our effort go? It's hard not to envy the monsters when you see how good they have it and how unbothered they are at being monsters.
Welcome to the Busy Girls Book Club. We are a podcast that rates and reviews book talks and, January literati's favorite books of the year. And we tell you whether or not you should take the time out of your busy schedule to read them. I'm Catherine.
I'm Casey.
And I'm Caitlin. And I don't know why I was given the part where you have to summarize the book because still not really sure entirely what it was about. This week we're doing Martyr with the exclamation point. You've probably seen the cover. It's very easy to recognize. Essentially, it is about this Iranian American man who is on the search for the idea of like a meaningful death via people in his life, famous people, artists, while struggling with his own like addiction recovery and self-worth. But it's like very POV jump to people like who are like his parents, like people who are also past, and also so like time jumps and interspersed with poetry because he's a poet. And none of the poems make sense to me because I don't do poetry. And yeah.
It's sort of magical realism-y because there are dreams that are like unclear if they're real or not. And they seem like they're kind of real.
But they're
It's
really
very
not.
like, yeah.
And then the ending's very magical realism, which I wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
Okay,
but that was a pretty good summary,
different interpretations of the ending then. I did not get magical realism from this book in the slightest. To each their own, I guess. Oh
Fair
dear.
enough.
Well, we'll discuss. Okay, so first things first, did you guys bring reviews?
Yes, I have a very short one. I couldn't find a good 1-star review, but I found a 5-star review that's funny. And it's just this: unhinged pick for in-flight reading.
Oh God.
Yeah, unhinged.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't read this on a plane, guys.
I would personally not. It's not a spoiler to say the main character's mom was killed in a terrorist attack, or not a terrorist attack. She was killed by like a quote unquote mistake by the US military, where the US military shot down a passenger plane full of Iranian passengers. And so that is like a big thing in the beginning of the book and also the end of the book.
Yes.
Also, he's Iranian and contemplating the term martyr, which has its own complications.
Yeah. I had to Google a lot of Iranian history for this book, actually.
Yeah. It's very heavy in like Muslim and Islam, like folk tales and their own like interpretations of morals and stuff like that, which I don't have any basis in because I grew up Catholic, but I was very interested in it.
Yeah.
I have 2 reviews. I have a 3.5 star. There are no bad reviews on Storygraph, only DNFs, because I don't know. Storygraph people are so sophisticated. They seem to get things better than I do. But here's a 3.5. While the prose was excellent, I didn't really enjoy the format, pacing, or scattered perspectives embodied in the narrative. Most of the supporting characters felt a little flat and more like props meant to assuage Cyrus's actual delusion. He was not a likable character to me at all. This book would honestly have made a much better play than a novel. Let's just put it that way.
Interesting.
See that point? Yeah.
And then I picked, I don't know, which was giving a little life to a bit. And then I found a 4-star review that I felt was pretty applicable. It just says, I am thinking.
Real. Okay. I have 3 reviews because there was a big theme I was noticing as I was reading the reviews. So they're all thematically connected.
Wow.
The first one is a 2-star. For better or for worse, this book was written by a poet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, Second one is a 3-star review. You can tell this book was written by a poet, and I mean that in both good and bad ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then another 3-star. The prose, you can tell it's written by a poet, but the plot, you can tell it's written by a poet.
I
Fair.
like the theme of your reviews.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, I mean, what about you guys? What did y'all think?
I
Oh,
gave
wait,
it
wait, wait.
wait.
Sorry. The overall Goodreads is 4.2 out of 5, and the overall Amazon, oh, it's also 4.2 out of 5.
I think this is the first time they're both the same.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
I did a double
I want
take.
to
I was
wait.
like,
I need to look at the story graph one. Now I'm curious. But what were your reviews? Oh, story graph 4.39 average.
okay.
Oh, it's all
Close.
pretty close, though. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Actually,
gave. Hmm?
never mind. I was gonna say I'll go first because I know I'm the lowest.
Do you want to go first?
I can.
Go for it.
This was 3 stars for me. I liked the themes it was picking apart and some of the complexities that came with the main POV's identity because they're things I don't have to think about. However, I disliked the setup of the book and I may have still given it 4 stars, but I hated the ending. I hated it so much.
Interesting.
So 3 stars for me.
Okay. I gave it 4 stars. It's a weak 4 stars because I liked the book. I don't like poetry either. I don't get poetry. So those were the moments of the book where I started to like glaze over and I just couldn't understand what he was trying to say. I understood what he was going for, but then I was like, can we end this? Can we stop? But I liked the character. I know like some of the reviews said he was an unlikable character. I was like, I thought he was raw and real, and he wasn't like the typical male main character that like annoys the fuck out of me. So I felt like I could actually read him and understand. And I liked that the book was short because if it was any longer, the star rating would be going down a lot. So yeah, I mean, it's a good read. It's an interesting read.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much at the same spot. I would also say I also gave it 4 stars, and I'm sort of like a weak 4 stars too. Um, I thought it was super interesting and unique. Like, I think one of the reasons why it's so highly reviewed is I just can't really think of another book in like commercial US markets that is really like this and kind of dissects this history. And that was one of the big pros for me, is I really felt like I learned a lot about a culture and a perspective that I really haven't read before. So like I said before, there were things about like Iranian culture and Iranian art that I was Googling, and I thought it was cool to kind of learn about that stuff as I went through the book. Um, I think the main problem with this book for me was the pacing. It's even though it's short, the middle like really drags, and there's this whole probably 100 pages where I was like, I just don't know where we're going right now. Um, but like there are passages in this book that I have thought about every day since I read it. So I still liked it a lot. I just didn't think that it was perfect.
It was written by a poet.
It was
Yeah, it was written by a poet. All right. Well, our non-spoiler discussion, more plot or character driven?
There's no plot.
Yeah, obviously character.
Following one dude and his family.
Yeah. Oh, also the other thing I was going to say about it is like I personally didn't have a problem with Cyrus, but also I felt that like every other character in the book was more interesting than Cyrus. And so sometimes when I was reading his perspective, I'd be like, hurry up, hurry up. I want to read more about your mom. Like,
yeah. And I felt like the book had too many perspectives with not enough depth to each one. I would have much preferred if it was just 2 perspectives. And I'll get into those 2 perspectives in the spoiler section.
Yeah.
I would have preferred if it was just him, his parents, and maybe his uncle. Like the family, none of the dreams, none of the other stuff, and just like the complexities of being who he is.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a little simplistic for poets, so.
Yeah. Um, okay. So have you slash would you read other books by the author?
I have not. I also have not looked up any other books by him. So maybe, but if he's a poet, then no.
I was gonna say, I think
Um,
his other books are all poetry. And I'm not a poetry girl, so
None of us are.
if he wrote another
um,
like just fiction novel, I would read it, but I'm not gonna read poetry.
sorry, I'm not reading more. I don't get it. I don't get
Fair.
him. I don't get his writing style.
Right. And I already kind of mentioned this. It's a short book, but it's not necessarily a super quick read. How is the pacing for you guys?
Thought the pacing was all right, but I definitely like wanted to put it down and
Yeah.
not pick it
Yeah.
back up for a bit. But I did not
Yeah.
have that luxury because I only had 2 days to read it. So I had 2 days to read it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not nicely paced. It's a very slow drag.
Yeah, the first two-thirds I think are super slow. Um, and then the end goes really fast, which is just like uneven. And then it didn't take that long to read, but you're right. Like I didn't want to pick it back up. Also, last time we read a book that was speculating about grief and stuff, my uncle died, and now we're reading a book about grief and my other uncle died. So I just didn't want to read it most of the time
Yeah.
in general. Like it's not a nice light read. It's a read you gotta be in the headspace for. So I put this down for like, I don't know, a week or two before picking it back up. But like when I picked it back up, it was quick to finish because I had to finish it. Also, like we were supposed to record this last week and just like didn't. So none of us finished it on time.
No.
Yeah, none of us did. I do think part of the problem is like Cyrus is so tortured and lost. And like, I really did feel for him. Like, Catherine, I agree with you. He didn't bother me as much as other coming of age male main characters because his struggles felt more legitimate and real. And you can kind of understand why he's struggling so much. But it also is like, every time I went back to pick up the book, I was like, oh, fuck, I'm just gonna have to read about Cyrus being so sad and
Well, he is pretentious. And that was a lot of the comments was just the pretentiousness of the book. He is
yeah.
incredibly pretentious and
Uh-huh.
uses big words to mask his like own pain and frustration and try to be
Yeah.
better than people, which can get very annoying. But at the same time, like his inner thoughts aren't as pretentious as his outer speaking.
Yes. And he, to be fair,
Yeah.
also, they address that head on. Like, they address that he does that to mask his like insecurity about not kind of being a loser.
Right. My favorite person's his sponsor.
Yes, Gabe.
Who's like, this isn't, he's like, you're in
Right.
Indiana, dude.
Yeah, he said, cut the shit.
Yeah, Gabe was my favorite character too. He totally read him the riot act and he got so pissy about it. And Gabe was just like, "You still sober?" And he's like, "Yep." And he's like, "Cool."
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't love the pacing either. Yeah, you just kind of have to kind of get through the book. Would you watch a movie or TV show of the book?
Fuck
No.
no. That is a resounding no.
I truly cannot even imagine what a movie or a TV show about this book would even look
It
like.
does read, if you could figure out how to order it correctly, more like a stage play, like that review I
Yeah,
read. Like it would
yeah,
be an interesting art form as like, like Death of a Salesman kind of vibe.
yeah.
However, I still wouldn't watch it.
No.
I do. I agreed with that review. As soon as you read it, I was like, it's kind of a good idea,
It is a
Yeah.
stage play-esque kind of reading.
but I wouldn't go see it either. So, all
Nope.
Sorry.
right, period. Busy girl rating. It's already that time.
Oof. Oh, like maybe a 3 because I think it's short enough that you could argue for it. And I think it has a unique perspective, especially for Americans, because we were in active combat with the Iranians and the Iranian government. And we don't really learn about this stuff because we don't
Yeah.
look great in this limelight because that plane crash did indeed happen. It's a real thing that happened. And we shot
Yep.
down a passenger plane and then never
And didn't apologize for
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
You're just like an honest mistake. And I'm like, so are you sorry? No.
Right.
Okay. So 3 stars.
I'll mirror the three. Like it was fine. If you're gonna make it through the book, it's not that hard to make it through. There are pacing flaws though, so
Right. I feel like anytime none of us finish the book on time, we can't give it higher than a three.
No.
So I'll also give it a three. Even though I did enjoy it, I think I agree with Caitlin. It's kind of a pick your moment book.
Yeah. If you are suicidal or have addiction issues or depressed or heavily
Mhm.
anxious or dealing with grief, maybe not the book for you.
Right. Um, okay. That all being said, I'm actually really, really excited to discuss this book because it's super deep. There's so many themes. There's all these like weird dreams and stuff. So I do think it's a good book club book, and I'm excited to talk about it, but don't spoil it for yourself. And let's get into it. First question. What did you think of Cyrus? And the kind of one of his big central struggles is his addiction. He's now sober, but he has been addicted to alcohol for most of his 20s
And drugs.
and drugs. He did everything, but
Mhm.
the opening scene where he decides to become sober is very strange.
Mhm.
However, I've never been an addict, so maybe that's how people decide to become sober is through strange small occurrences. I don't know, like he was a compelling character. He just, I feel like, lost momentum throughout. Like I just like you guys have said, like there were other characters I was more interested in, namely like his mom
Yeah,
and I don't know, he just kind of fell by the side for me as the like most interesting character.
right. I think the portrayal of addiction in the book, I don't struggle with addiction, so obviously I don't know for sure, but to me it felt really honest, like, and it was sort of ever present in his mind, and it was very important even to his like struggle with living is he didn't have anything to sort of turn his mind away from his depression anymore. So a lot of his addiction kind of stemmed from this generational trauma and like sadness and not knowing where he came from or understanding where he wanted to go, not having figures in his life that were examples to him and stayed around for him to help guide him. And so I thought that was like very well done. Um, but yeah, I mean, much like many coming of age stories, he's totally directionless, and sometimes it's like a little bit boring. Um, Especially when we get other perspectives like his mom, where she's this queer woman who's sort of around for like the conservative movement in Iran.
A
And so
revolution. Yeah.
right, she goes from being able to be like an academic and sort of openly gay to basically being forced to be married and then has this like queer love story. And so I was like, I'm sorry, but that's way more interesting.
Yeah. I mean,
Yes.
his mom, I mean, we are three women. So
Mhm.
obviously the woman's going to be more interesting of a perspective naturally, but she also had a very unique perspective of living through the Iranian Revolution
Mhm.
and the Ayatollah coming about, um, and how much Iran changed in that time period. And then also her and Layla's story was very beautiful and very interesting. I did really like the opening scene because my family has some addiction struggles. It's just kind of Irish genes. We get very addicted to things very quickly. Um, and I've noticed, at least secondhand, that uh, getting out of addiction, you become kind of very either religious or have some sort of spiritual journey where it's like you felt like another being told you to stop doing this. Like it feels like there's like a divine intervention to stop you. So that did feel really real. And I was like, I could see that happening in real life. And then also, I liked that none of the side characters really let him have his bullshit where they were like fighting back and saying like, no, you're being a pretentious ass and you're
Mhm.
wrong. And I liked that they called him out on it because also like I felt so bad for Z because he was being like treated like a side hoe the entire book.
Yeah.
And like he was just not dealing with his own sexuality, but like you can tell that's all from generational trauma and the fact that his father was really never around. He was just there to like provide for him, but he was dealing with his own grief. And then his mother was just gone. And he was American, but not, an Iranian, but not. So he was just kind of living this like dual life where he could never like coincide and he could never be enough for either side. So you could tell that it really caused some schisms in him.
Yeah. Um, so then we get to Cyrus's dad, who ends up raising him and his family. So they have like one living relative who's still in Iran and who has some pretty severe PTSD from fighting in the war. Um, and then his whole like Iranian heritage and the plane crash that we think kills his mom. Um, what did you guys think of all that?
I was really interested in the uncle Arash. Like,
Hmm.
that's
Mhm.
a super unique perspective. I did not know that they dressed up random platoon
Yes.
members to be like this angel of death to prevent these dying people from committing suicide, because I knew that suicide was a huge taboo in like Muslim culture. I did know that, but I did
Mhm.
not know that that was actually a thing that they like kept secret, and they did this in order and put like a flashlight under their cloaks in order to look like an angel so that these men, if they were dead or dying, did not take their own lives and weren't allowed into heaven. Which I think was very interesting because then like you see his PTSD journey and how he like just spirals because he sees so much death and that's all he sees during the Iraq Iran war. Um, and so that was, I was just super interesting. And I also like, I felt for him because like he's like exiled from his own country. He lives in Dubai
Mhm.
and he's just kind of, he's like a waif. Like he has no family left. He has no one to care for him besides like caregivers. And Cyrus is really his only relative. And that's kind of like depressing and sad because he didn't ask for any of this. He was drafted or conscripted. And so it's just kind of like, damn, that sucks.
I also thought he was interesting as well as the rest of the family because they lived in the margins between like being Iranian but not necessarily being Muslim religious. Like they
Mhm.
were like he was like I am like a Muslim as well many Catholics are Catholic, like you just kind of say you are. And so it was really interesting too that his uncle had to like deal with this role he was given that was already like terrifying and like had lasting consequences while also like not totally believing in what he was being made to do, which I
Yeah.
found like I thought his chapters were so interesting and I would have taken more of them.
Yeah.
Cyrus's dad, very sad, kind of boring, but that was the point, you know.
Right.
The monotonousness.
Right. No, I agree. I thought the whole angel of death thing was so interesting. Also, the scene in the book that has stuck with me the most is when Cyrus sees the painting that we learn is Orchida's, who we learn is his mom, um, and calls him. And his uncle is basically like, you see something divine and call me because like you have no connection to like divinity or meaningful spirituality. So the only thing you can even think to do is call me. And I just like think about that a lot of him being like, what are you doing calling me? Like you're so lost from yourself and from things greater than you that you can't even process this and you just call me. And so I thought that he was actually like A, super interesting, and B, one of the most effective characters in actually developing Cyrus. Um, I thought similar things about the others. I do want to talk about this now. I am so mad at Cyrus's mom.
Yes.
I am like so deeply angry at her. And it's so complicated. Like, that is, I think, part of why I ended up liking this book more than disliking it is because I understand her, like in the situation she was in. Like, she was a queer woman who was forced to be with a man. I didn't even really want to have a family. And all these things were forced on her, and her like life was like taken away from her. And so I get it, but also she was like abandoned Cyrus. And then you find out that they were all in the United States the whole time. It's
Which
like
is the worst part, by
Yeah.
far.
crazy. Yeah.
They were hundreds of miles away from each other because they were both on the East Coast area.
Yeah.
She's like, I had no idea you were here. I was like, you clearly didn't try and look him up. That's why.
Yes. It's wild that she never even tried to just find him on the internet at all.
Like, she had no motherly instincts whatsoever.
Whatsoever.
And it
And you
was
see that from her
unsettling.
perspective at the time period where she's just like, I don't want this kid. I know about this kid and I need a break. After like a couple of weeks being a mother, she was like, I need a break. I'm like, this kind of proves that not all women need to be mothers.
Right. And so I was like, I get it, but I was so angry at her. And I feel like one of the biggest themes in this book is actually just lack of closure, like the fact that closure rarely actually exists in real life. Because so they think that his mother is killed in this terrorist or not terrorist attack, but brutal accidental murder. And the US government never really takes accountability for it. So there's like no closure there. And
Give some blood
then,
money.
right, a little, hardly any as well. I was like, oh my God.
That's all what life costs is $300,000. Okay.
Yeah, wild. And then Cyrus and his dad moved to the country that killed her. And then Cyrus's dad just sort of like works in obscurity, never knowing anything else. Cyrus finally finds his mom, and then she kills herself before they can actually talk about it. I was like, what a fucking coward.
Yeah. And then tells her ex-wife to tell him about her. And I'm like, really? Really?
Yeah.
That's so fucked up. And Sang even says that. It's like, this is so fucked up that she forced me to do this for you.
Well,
Yeah.
and like some artist, you are not even seeing your project through to the end, okay?
Right.
Like,
And
you're supposed to be there until you die, not until you kill yourself.
right. And I like felt like that's one thing about the ending that bothered me is her choice to ultimately take her life goes totally unexamined.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I was like, was she just in that much pain? Like she didn't want to see Cyrus one more time. Like it just felt like one last slap in the face.
And he
It was
was
like a cop-out.
too okay with it too.
Yeah.
Which is how you knew he was like not okay.
No.
Yeah.
But
I was like, your mom finally meets you and then she kills herself. Oh my God.
After you were just talking to her about you potentially committing suicide.
Right. And it's like, you can see that like Cyrus really suffers by not having more adults care for him. Like he just doesn't have that many people guiding him and helping him make choices.
well, and like looking back on their conversations before he knows she's his mom, he like brings up this idea of martyrdom and wanting his life to like mean a little something before he leaves, but ultimately he like wants to leave life.
Mhm.
And she was just kind of like, oh, that's fascinating. Tell me more. And like her maternal instinct should be like, oh no, you have so much more life to live, you know? Like, but she kind of just like provokes his thoughts and is like, tell me more. What do you think? You know?
I mean, I feel like in her own way, she was trying to discourage him from it by saying like, oh, just another troubled Iranian man who's going to commit an act of violence. Like she was just kind of like, oh, it's like every Iranian man I know or every Persian man I know that you become so troubled that you commit suicide. And so she does kind of try and deter him from it, but she also, the conversations were very weird about that. And she was like the wise old owl, but without any sort of like maternal instinct.
Yeah. So then it's like you would think that once, a son meets his long lost mother who he doesn't even know is alive, you would think that would be a moment of like accountability and closure. And the author doesn't give it to us. And I think that's kind of great, but it's also just so painful. Caitlin did not like it.
No.
I'm guessing.
I didn't like that part of the ending. I didn't like the ending in general, but like there's just so much unresolved trauma, and then it ends in what can be interpreted as more trauma. So I just don't like feeling that unsettled at the end of a book.
Yes, it was
which I
very
know is the
unsubtle.
point, but I don't like that. Like, that's not my kind of book.
Right. I did think so. My prediction of who she was going to be is I thought that she was her mom's lover.
Yeah, I thought it
Layla.
was going to be Layla.
I thought it was Layla too. I did not expect
Yeah.
it to be actually her.
And I do think I would have liked it better if it was Layla because it would
Yes.
have felt like she doesn't have the same responsibility to Cyrus, but obviously she would have been interested in like getting to know him a little bit.
But she
Um,
obviously didn't care either because she was like, yeah, leave your baby. Like, let's go flee the country. Be
okay.
lesbian lovers somewhere
To
else.
be fair to her, she was probably going to be like stoned to death, because
Yeah, but
her husband found
she
out
could have
about
taken the
it.
baby with her, you know?
Right. But I don't put that on Layla for like,
No.
that was up to Roya.
Yes, but I feel like if she also cared about children, she'd be like, no, bring your like 3-month-old baby, you know?
Right. Um, but okay. Rewinding back to um this book is obviously like driven partly by Cyrus getting inspiration for this project to do a story about martyrs and people who die for some greater purpose. What did you think about the discussion of martyrdom in the book and the different perspectives that come via like all the other characters and their deaths?
I thought it was interesting because each person comes to the book with a different view on religion and with a different level of religiosity. And so you can tell that they're all thinking because martyrdom is not only Cyrus not is not the only one who mentions it. Like Arash mentions it. I think his mother does mention martyrs as well in her own perspective because they grew up in a time when like on their mosque walls would be like the martyrs of war and it would be like the dead soldiers. That's how they would describe it, which is kind of like triggering and very like that's not great. Like that they're
Yeah.
saying like, "Oh, look, like you should be so happy your son is a martyr for the cause." And the mother would have to smile and not cry or else she'll be hanged with her son or like will be dead. Um it was very fascinating the discussion of martyrs and like the martyrs that he chose. Like I saw an Irish martyr was in there,
Yeah.
Billy Donovan. And
Yeah.
it was interesting because he said like the Irish and Iranian causes are very similar. And I'm like, yeah, I could see the like similarities between them of like the colonialism of it all. Different parts of the world and different circumstances, but similar like causes. Um, and so it was interesting because like I'm have some brief knowledge of like Islam, but I'm not very like well versed in it. So this was kind of a book that allowed me to like dive into a world that I don't see every day.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting, just like had never like I feel like martyrs are such a Catholic thing. And so I had never really thought about martyrs at all. Like if you asked me to name a martyr, probably the only one I could have even thought of was Joan of Arc. Like I
Period.
and so I did think it was interesting to explore that concept, especially as I learned throughout the book that it's very important to Iranians because it has this whole like link to the politics, as you mentioned, Catherine. And so I thought honestly that part of it, martyr being this kind of big political concept, was the most interesting part of it to me. And like what makes someone a martyr and like does their death really matter? Um,
I thought the concept that he brought up of earth martyrs was also really interesting. Like people whose lives don't have a large religious meaning, but still had meaning, which, like, ultimately, we hope everybody then is an earth martyr, you know? But then he's like focusing in on that and putting that against his, his Persian idea of a martyr versus like the religious idea of a martyr.
Mhm.
And yeah, it is really interesting because I feel like when we think martyr, yeah, we think like Catholicism or we think suicide bomber. Like there's
Yep.
no in between
Yeah.
in our definition in America, but he is dissecting like that there's many, many meanings to the word martyr.
Yeah.
Right.
One's gruesome death, the other is gruesome death caused by yourself.
Right. Um, Though I admit I did not like the poetry, so
No, same. But
sorry.
Mm-mm.
Okay. And then for me, one of the best parts of the book, what did you guys think of Roya and Layla?
It was the best part of the book.
period. The giraffe scene, love the giraffes.
The
Just spinning of the
drama, I
rolls.
love the drama, okay? Like,
Mhm.
it was the most interesting part. Like, there was the most movement in that perspective.
Yeah, I agree. Um, it felt like the most like plot part of the book. Like their story had like a definite direction, and we obviously knew that eventually Roya, or we thought we knew that Roya eventually got on the plane, and so um and then there were the dream sequences, which
No,
sorry, I actually liked them. I figured I'm
no,
probably the only person here who liked them.
They were all right. I
I
didn't
hated
hate
them.
them like Caitlin, though.
Right.
I just, okay, I understand them. I just personally don't know how to appreciate them correctly.
So, what I liked about them is they were supposed to be dreams, and then they were connected to Cyrus's insomnia. Like, this is how he falls asleep, is like imagining random people talking to each other. Um, but the things that they say are true. So, like, that's how we first learn that Cyrus's mom is gay, is actually through something that his like manifestation of her says in a dream sequence. So I sort of like that they walk this line. Like Cyrus is dreaming them, but they're also like seem to be like actually true to the character that he's dreaming about, like more than he could have known. And so I like that they're kind of like real and not real at the same time.
I liked the conversations. It's just that it's like
Yeah.
Marge Simpson shrinking in the place filling with water or whatever while it's happening. Like, I don't,
Or cutting
Yeah.
off your fingers to pay for art.
that was the
Yeah.
best one.
That was a
That
good
was the
one.
best one. That
That
one
was
was
the best
good.
one.
That one had the
President
most
invective.
powerful meaning behind
Yeah.
it. And it was somehow the least weird. Like, I don't know. I just, like I said, not my style,
I
but
didn't
I get
really
the
care
point.
about like the dreams, like the description of the dreams. It was just more of the conversations between
Yeah,
the two
yeah.
people
Yeah.
and like who he chose as the two people having conversations. And you could tell it was still his voice for a lot of it, but it was information that he couldn't have possibly known.
Mhm.
So like when his dad talks to the poet, and it's just like, yeah, my wife was cheating on me, I'm pretty sure. And there's no way Cyrus could have known that because I don't think Ali ever told him that.
Right.
So,
He was a
like,
baby.
yeah, I think it's just interesting that they're both real and not real. And it's kind of like that hint of magical realism in the story itself.
Yeah. Okay. So then this is sort of now towards the more ending of the book where it starts to get a little more interesting. Um, Cyrus goes to New York to meet this artist known as Orchida, who is also Iranian. And obviously, we've already exposed a twist. She ends up being Cyrus's mom. But she's there doing an exhibit called Death Speak because she's dying of cancer. And so she opens up this exhibit to have like blunt, open conversations with people in her final days. What did you guys think of the exhibit and Cyrus and Orchida's conversations?
I mean, the logic brain person in me is like, there's no way a museum would ever sign up for this because of the liability they would have to take on
She
if they
signed the
died.
forms.
Forms
Yeah.
are not enough. No museum would ever in their right mind take this on. So I was already like, okay, this is very unrealistic. And then also I was like, that would be my literal hell is I'm dying and I have to talk to strangers multiple times a day and they pay me to talk to them. I don't know. That sounds horrifying. But for this story, it was very interesting because it allowed like Cyrus to actually have kind of some of the first real conversations he's had in a while with someone because he's been keeping it all in or just not talking to people or being like pretentious and brash about things, but never like actually talking about the real stuff and confronting real life. I will say it was hard for me to read because recently my aunt passed away from metastatic breast cancer, stage 4. So this is the exact disease she died from. And I saw her on her last few days, and the descriptions of his mother dying of breast cancer are painfully accurate. And
Mm.
so that was hard to read. That was probably the most beautiful part of the book, but also the hardest part for me to approach.
I Yeah. Like I said, not one to read if you're experiencing grief yourself. Also, the real like the A, it's not realistic that they'd have this exhibit. B, not realistic that he would never ever travel outside of Indiana because he's poor and suddenly decide to go to Brooklyn to see this. And stupid that Sad James as a character was only introduced to get him there. And I'm like, honestly, it was kind of interested in Sad James.
Yeah.
Didn't get any more of him. Text him at the end, like, dude, look, the obituary, and that was it. Like, it was such a
Yeah.
random inclusion of a minor character that also frustrated me. Um, I don't know. It was interesting. It was an interesting way to facilitate like him thinking out loud, I guess, essentially. I don't like, that she knew and he didn't. And that's why, like I said, you felt unsettled at the end. I just honestly would have preferred more of those conversations to like the dream conversations, even. So
Yeah.
I liked it and I didn't like it.
I did like it just because I did enjoy their connection, and I liked that she did finally seem like a maternal figure. Like she would kind of chide him in like the way that your mom might chide you. And like engage seriously with his ideas, but was also kind of like, oh, of course, another Iranian man obsessed with becoming a martyr. Um, I was just honestly, I will never get over the fact that she killed herself.
So
Like,
fucked up.
it just like constantly makes me so mad because I did really like their interactions and just like the grief that Cyrus felt over her, like losing his mom twice and not even being able to get the truth from her is so painful. So it's like, I just think she's a coward, but I still,
I mean, she runs away from her problems. That's her character.
yeah, right.
She did it once, she did it again.
And just the fact that like her husband, again, I don't think she necessarily owes him anything because she was like forced to be with him basically. But it is like you really let him like toil away so hard to raise y'all's son and like never even really cared to just even find out if they were okay. It just felt so uh,
I mean, I felt bad for his dad, but at the same time, I was kind of like, you wanted the kid. She didn't. And you knew she
right.
didn't want the kid.
Right.
So you kind of got what you asked for in a very blunt and awful way.
Right.
But like that was what you wanted out of your life. That is not what she wanted out of her
He
life.
said he was going to do all the work, like with a dog. So he did all the work, that's for
He
sure.
did.
Um, okay. So the twist we've already kind of mentioned. I did not see it coming. I thought it was going to be Layla. Um, and I still have complicated feelings about it being his mom. I do think it started to stretch my believability a little bit just because of the journey she had to have gone on to get to the United States, just like on foot, basically. Um,
Yeah, and on someone else's passport. Like I know it was the 80s or whatever, but like
right. And it never totally made sense to me. I mean, I guess like they switched passports because there was like an alert out on her lover's
right. I just
name.
mean the realisticness of her like establishing an entirely new life with this
Right.
not her passport in the US of all places. Like I don't
Right.
know.
And you can't
No,
you
I
can't
agree.
expect that she legally entered the US.
Right. Like she would have had to have been undocumented. Um, well, it's even like I just never fully understood why they didn't run away together. Like if they were both ultimately going to leave, and I feel like that doesn't really get explained, and that's part of my like
Yeah,
pickiness at the end of the book is like I actually didn't feel like the whole like sequence of events like totally adds up.
I actually got that. It's because if Layla had used her own passport, it
Oh,
would have
right.
pinged her husband. Like, because,
Right.
women are not autonomous at the time and still
Right.
super aren't. But so I think the goal was for her to go by plane to get out fast while Roya was going to use Layla's passport and like sneak out by land, essentially is the vibe I got, so that Layla's passport was not like pinged, you know?
And they were going to meet
Right.
back up later.
Yeah.
But then I just feel like, why didn't they just both go the like undercover way together?
But if they were together and it was obvious to the immigration officials, they would have put them both in custody.
Yeah, I don't think they
Yeah, I
could
guess
have left
so.
together.
But
I don't know.
anyway,
Iran in the 80s, who knows?
right.
Have you ever
It would
seen Fargo?
no.
Okay, that deals with the revolution and the American hostages in the embassy.
Mm.
Um, and they have a whole sequence of them trying to get through Iranian airport control. And there's like, it was intense, the amount of passport control there was.
Oh shit. Okay. Well, anyway, what did you guys think of it being his mom?
It stretched the believability a bit
Yeah.
because, like, the passports, even if they were grainy photos, taking over someone's identity is kind of hard to do.
Yeah.
Especially like if you're going to get questioned by passport control. And then also, it's heartbreaking because she killed herself, and that's fucked up. Like, what the hell? You knew he was coming back, and you just traumatized him all again, and then
Yeah,
force
you
your
were like, see
ex-wife.
you tomorrow.
See you
You're like, I'm gonna
tomorrow.
go kill myself.
Yeah, I'm just gonna officially become a martyr. Whatever, it's fine. It was just weird. I didn't expect it, but I appreciated it more than if it was Layla because I don't think they would have had that connection if it was Layla.
Um,
Um,
Right.
but
yeah,
you know, the ending itself was the part that I was like, "What is this?"
I agree. That's where the believability started to really, really just take a turn was when he's like, oh, this painting, it's called Brother. And I'm like, surely it's Layla. Nope, it's his mom. Okay. And everything from there just got more unrealistic. And this is where I started to lose it. Like, I thought it was interesting, an interesting twist, but like, I don't know. I just didn't like it anymore from then on because I feel like we were dealing with some really real things, and then suddenly it was just very untangible things. And
Yeah.
I feel like it lost some of its, like I said, I thought it was maybe 4 stars until I got to the end, and then I dropped it a whole star because I was like, I don't even know what's happening.
Yeah. I did think so I really liked getting to meet Sang,
Yeah.
and I liked getting a little bit more insight from her, but the ending did still feel really abrupt to me. I would have liked it if we had like sat a little longer in it. Um just because like that's crazy. Like what happened was actually crazy. Um and I just felt like Cyrus didn't get a chance to really process it at all and like be angry and like really think about it. And so I think to me the ending could have been just done a little bit differently. But I
uh,
did kind of appreciate that how everything
yeah.
happened.
Speaking of the ending, I actually like went and read Reddits because I was like, I know this is open to interpretation, but I need to know what other people are interpreting. Like, is Cyrus dead at the end? And I read a really interesting one. Actually, I screenshotted it because I thought it was
Mhm.
interesting. It says, I think Cyrus dies by suicide at the end of chapter 22 after his fight with Z after calling his uncle to talk to him one last time. So this person thinks he was dead that whole part. And he says it's because when he was taking a shower the next morning, he mentions how he can usually catch a few sparks of his dreams if he closes his eye in the shower, but all he saw was the backs of his eyes. And it just gets weirder and weirder from there as he leaves the
Mhm.
city. And then talking about Orchida, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that.
I don't either. I could.
Purchasing the Fall of Icarus painting in that sequence there, and it's like equating Cyrus to potentially, Icarus unnoticed in the background of the painting as he dies. So, and that would track, like it kind of feels like at the end, like he's like, and from somewhere I feel people like with their hands on me and Z crying, like I assume he has taken his life, and that is like a hospital scene somewhere. He's imagining the rest of it and like thinking about the things he never told Z, but like I don't know, it's so
Yeah.
open to interpretation. And then it's like, in that case, did his mom kill herself, or like, like just how is he? I don't know.
So my interpretation of it, which I did like the last sort of like dreamscape scene. I thought it
No.
was really beautiful.
Mm-mm.
But my interpretation of it is that just like Cyrus's whole picture of reality is falling apart. And so that's what we're reading is like a huge part of like what his life and his like sense of self and like knowledge of himself was built off this like tragedy that his mother was killed in this US attack. So his mom is dead. He doesn't have a mom. And then him and his dad are just making it work. And now he has to go back and like erase everything. He can't, like, his dad will never have that truth. Um, and like reimagine basically his whole sense of self, as in, like, no, my mom was alive and she was this great artist, but and she was in the United States, but like I didn't know her and she like basically chose not to have like a real relationship with me at the end. And so to me that last scene was just like him, like his whole sense of self basically like deconstructing, and like his picture of reality deconstructing, and him just like having to like fall apart before he
So
could put
you
it back
don't
together.
think he's dead?
I don't think he's dead.
I also don't think he's dead. I think he's a very active mind and active imagination. And I do think it seemed like it was end of the world. It was the apocalypse, essentially, because there's the four horsemen, the ground's getting really, really hot, people are disappearing. Like it felt very like just apocalypse. Um, I don't know if Z showed up at the end. I think he might have. I think he actually did say "I love you" to him, and then like collapsed in on himself essentially. And it's just like this has been really fucked up. I can totally see where you're coming from, Casey. Where he's just this is his reality and his world has just collapsed in on itself, and now he's having like a panic attack essentially, and going really vivid hallucinations. Because I want to
Yeah.
believe that him and Sang's conversation was real, and that the
Mm,
two of them connecting and her saying like,
Yeah.
I'm going to be here for you because I loved your mother, and your mother, despite her flaws, would want me to be here for you, and that he now has family again. I want to believe that he's alive then. So maybe it's my own naive self that I just don't want him to be dead. Um, but it was a weird ending to like say like the
It
four
is.
horsemen, the ground, and then just going to a coda, which is just Roya in the past. And I was like,
Yeah,
wait,
I
what?
didn't need the coda. Sorry,
No,
it
I didn't
didn't
need the
have
coda
anything
either.
for me other than she was
yeah.
really happy without her son.
Yeah, no, I didn't need that part either.
There's also like, I feel like before I was reading stuff on Reddit, I kind of interpreted it as maybe when he fainted after finding out his mom was dead, the rest of the book is what was happening in his head when he fainted. So I kind of
Yeah.
got that vibe too, possibly, but I don't know. Also, all the excerpts of his book are like docx, like they're like unpublished files. So it's like maybe he never published his book and maybe he is dead. But like,
Right.
well, we won't know.
Yeah.
Right. It's true. Wow. Well, that's the end.
Is it? I don't know.
Yeah. What a fucked up way to end.
Yeah, it kind of is. Um, but okay. I mean, is there anything else you guys want to say? Should we get to book recommendations? Do you have a book to recommend?
I mean, if you really want a fucked up book about a sad life, a little life, it's a very sad book and very long. But I feel like people who
Right.
like this book might actually enjoy a little life.
Right.
Yeah, I actually, when we're talking about creating art and weird dream sequences and just kind of like, I don't know, weird emotional analysis, I would recommend Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow.
Mm,
Because there's like weird video game sequences in there and stuff, and it helps the character work through stuff and has some interesting themes, and is also not my favorite. So,
right. Well, I'm gonna recommend James by Percival Everett. Um, Another very literary book that is also like, is this really happening? Is that not really happening? It kind of has that sort of like reality, but with some magical realism type feel. And it also has like a lot of historical context to it. So I feel like there's a lot of similar kind of vibes going on. Also very short and a book I really loved. So I think that's it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for listening. Sorry for missing last week, but we're back.
We're so back.
So be sure to stick with us. Rate and review the podcast 5 stars wherever you listen. Tell your friends about us. Let us know what other books you want to hear from us. I have seen we had some come in on our website form, so we
Ooh,
have you to look at. But yeah, follow us at Busy Girls Pod everywhere, busygirlspod.com if you want to see our book recs, other things we've been reading, and don't forget you can watch us on YouTube. So with that, I'm Caitlin.
I'm Casey.
And I'm Catherine. Thanks for listening. And when you get a chance, take a break with the Busy Girls Book Club.